These are the 5 best chess traps for advanced players. Now, these traps aren't always played in games, but they're understood and they're used to win games. So, even though you might not see these in a lot of games, they're in the background. They're not being played, but they're informing their decisions. So, anyway, let's go ahead and get into it. We'll start with e4, e5, knight f3, and then knight f6 is the Petrov. Now, this is seen a lot more as you gain strength. This is played a lot at the highest level, and it was popularized by Fabiano Caruana in his match against Carlsen. So here, white takes on e5, and then d6 was played. The knight goes back. This is typically how it should be played, and then knight takes e4. And here, a nice move here is to play knight c3. And if black takes on c3, we take with a d pawn, and our bishops fly out. We castle long, and we kind of get to launch our pawns down the board a lot of the time. It's really fun position. So sometimes black might mistakenly try to defend this knight, and you actually cannot do this at all. So again, even though this isn't played a ton, masters and advanced players understand this, because here you don't take on e4. You just play queen to e2 first. So you pin this knight, and as soon as black breaks it, this is black's most testing try to break the pin and now threaten to move the knight and be totally fine. After this, white can play knight to d5. Now, at first glance, it just looks like we're attacking the queen, just a one-move threat. But this is really, really powerful because the queen has no good squares. It needs to stay on the e-file, otherwise d3 is going to be winning that knight because it's just attacking a pinned piece. This knight can't move, so all we have to do is attack it, and then we win it. And then if the queen goes e5, the knight on f3 is covering it, so it can't go there. The queen goes to e6, knight takes c7 is a family fork. Very devastating. And then, black's out of options. He can move to the side, but then again, d3, and white is winning. So this is a really nice trick. And a really nice thing to understand is that even though black can break this pin, this knight d5 move just kind of gives black's queen no squares to go to, and it wins white the game. Next, let's look at 1 d4, and then knight to f6, knight f3, d5. And this is just a standard semi-Slav, and both sides develop, and this is called the Cambridge Springs when the queen comes out to a5. This has been played numerous times. And here, white plays bishop takes f6. You may have seen in a few other videos where this bishop on g5 actually gets loose, and d takes c4 wins that bishop. So white just gets rid of it right away. Now he doesn't have to worry about this queen cutting across the board. And after knight takes f6, white might try to stop bishop b4, because bishop b4 is really annoying, pinning that knight and putting a lot of pressure on white's position. So sometimes white plays a3, or the a3 is at least a very tempting move to play because you just stop a lot of black's counterplay. But here, black is already much better because they can play knight to e4, and if they play rook to c1 to support this knight, black can play the nasty knight takes c3, rook takes c3, and then bishop takes a3. This pawn is defended 2 different ways, but neither one works because 1, this rook is pinned, so he can't take it. And 2, if you take on a3 with the pawn, that removes the defense of the rook on c3. So the Cambridge Springs has a lot of really nice traps and tactics like this that support its usage and why it can be a good weapon for black. So let's go back. After d4, sometimes black will play f5. This is the Dutch, not seen too much at the highest level, but I'm going to show you why it's not seen at the highest level. A lot of masters, a lot of really strong players play bishop to g5. This is called the hopped-in attack, and it really puts black in an awkward situation. If knight to f6, white is content to just take there, and then after he takes, white is going to have good control of the center, and this pawn on f5 feels a little misplaced. And here, h6 is played a lot to try to kick the bishop, so knight f6 is possible. And after bishop h4, g5. So they're really trying to kick this bishop out. And here, funnily enough, e4 is a move because you can't take that bishop because queen h5 is mate. So that's a little trap in itself. But bishop g3 is a little stronger. And then after f4, this is a mistake because of e3. So instead of pushing the pawn to e4, we push it to e3 so we can take on f4 next turn. And now we're already winning a pawn because if black, for example, deals with the queen h5 threat, then we just take on f4 and that's a clean pawn. White is well on their way to winning, especially because this diagonal is extremely weak. Potentially bishop e2 or bishop d3 is going to cause black huge problems. So after e3, black's in big trouble. One try that I'll show briefly is e5, but that leads to a fun variation where we take on f4, they take on f4, and we play bishop takes f4. A really nice sacrifice, because after g takes f, we have queen h5 check. Now the king is forced up to e7, and then queen e5 check. The king goes to f7, and we just keep harassing it. Bishop c4, d5, doesn't matter. Every move is check. Every move comes with a threat. And once we get to this position, there's no more useful checks, so we could just take this rook. And we're at 4 points of material, so white is more than winning. So a really nice way to fight against the Dutch is this bishop g5, and that's played at the advanced level very often. Next, stronger players often play the Sicilian. e4, e5 is played a ton at all levels, but the Sicilian is specifically seen more at higher levels. So after c5, knight to f3 is by far the most common, most testing, with the open Sicilian. So it takes, knight takes d4, and now there's a few ways that black can play. For example, one of them is knight to f6. And here, white defends that pawn on e4. Then after g6, white has this funny trap where they can take on c6, e takes c6, and play e5. And this knight is in a really awkward situation. It really doesn't want to go to h5 because white can just gain time kicking it around. It has to go back to g7, which is such an ugly square. So white would be very happy if he got this position already. So the knight often goes to g8, but after this, white just has a very, very pleasant position, just way ahead in development. All of black's pieces are on the last rank, so very, very bad position. So sometimes black will try knight to d5. Again, already this is not great for black because knight takes d5, pawn takes, queen takes, and now white's up a pawn, but, black has two bishops, and it's a wide open position. Maybe he has some counterplay. But this final move really drives the nail in the coffin. e6. It's a really nasty idea that you don't see too often. The idea is it doesn't matter which way black takes back on e6. Maybe black is scared of bishop e5, even though that's nothing. They can just play bishop d7. Or rook takes b5. But anyway, queen to e5 is our idea. And we're forking these rooks in the corners of the board. It's a really great demonstration of how powerful the queen is. It just slides over one square and it wins a rook, a full rook. So queen e5 is such a nice move, just completely winning for white here since he's going to go up a full rook. So the last one I'm going to show you is in the Sicilian, but instead of knight f6, we'll see g6. This is the accelerated dragon. And this is not played as much on the top level again, and I'm going to show you why. Because after knight c3, bishop g7, bishop e3, this is kind of the main line. Knight f6, bishop c4 is a very good move here. And after castles, the bishop retreats to b3. Now, here, one very well-known and very dangerous trap here is if black gets a little too careless and tries to go after this bishop, which seems tempting, right? This bishop has spent a good amount of time to get to b3, and we can kick it out in one move, or so it seems. Here, white can play e5. So this is already, again, very good for white because we're attacking this knight. Black doesn't have time for knight takes b3 because we're going to take their knight, and doesn't matter. They can take our rook. We're going to take their bishop. And at the end of the day, we're going to win this knight. So if they take, for example, we can win the knight. We don't even have to win it right now. We could just castle and take it later. But white is doing very, very well because white has 2 pieces for a rook and a pawn. So knight takes b3 really isn't that good. So instead of knight takes b3, black often tries to move the knight. And again, h5 isn't very appealing. So black tries to go to e8 a lot, but this allows a very, very devastating tactic. White plays the disgusting bishop takes f7. Again, there's 2 pieces that can take this bishop. 2 of them. But neither is good. Because if rook takes f7, this knight on a5, seemingly, not a very important move in the position, it's huge because here white can play knight to e6, and this queen is trapped because the knight covers these 2 squares and the bishop covers this one. And you can't take the knight because it's pinned. That pawn is pinned. So knight e6 is such a nice idea. So often, black can play king takes and say, okay, if you go knight e6, I mean, I'm protecting it with my king, I guess. Like, it's a little dangerous, but, at least I'm not losing my queen. And so white can play this anyway. White can play knight to e6 and king takes e6. This is such a crazy king hunt. Queen d5 check, supported by the knight. The king is forced to go to f5. And then we check it again. And now, black only has 1 move. King takes g4. We bring our rook in. Rook g1 check. King h5. And now queen to g2 is the final touch on the position. We're just threatening way too many mates. We're threatening queen g4. We're threatening queen g5. We're threatening queen h3. And there is no way that black can stop all of them. So this is a very quick trap, a very nice way that white can get a devastating mating attack very quickly. I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like and comment down below, and I'll see you in the next video.